Hello everyone, we are here and ready to bring you some more matches from round one of Masters Tour Asia Pacific. I'm Raven, and joining me to kick off these matches is Sottle. Are you ready for this one? We had a pretty quick match number one there with Derek and Gia, didn't we?
We did, yeah, but there's still plenty of action going on around the virtual tavern, so Raven and I are here to cover and fill in the gaps and try and bring you as much action as we possibly can while the rest of round one resolves. Of course, round one, extremely crucial. You see so many players, weighing the importance of round number one, dropping out if they lose, go 0-1, and just saying, no, there's no way I'm climbing back from this one. But still, a lot to play for, even if you do pick up an early loss here, as we saw from Fury Hunter in match number one. But certainly the start you want to get off to is picking up that.
Yeah, it definitely is a mixture of two aspects, isn't it? Not only is it generally harder to to qualify through to the final day if you take a loss so early in the Swiss, but also it's just that the mental issue. It's like, okay, match one, Swiss stage one, lost. Now I pretty much have to win every other match, because as we see, the further people go, 3-0, 4-0, 5-0, it's not only that they're more likely to go through, but it's they're comfortable as well, because it's like, okay, I don't want to lose, but if I do, there's still a great chance I can make it, whereas round one loss.
Tyler does have Priest in his lineup, which I think was not as common as some people expected. A lot of people have brought anti-Priest lineups to this tournament. I think a lot of people have expected that people are bringing anti-Priest lineup to this tournament, so the level of Priest is not as high as some people might have predicted going into it. We saw Aveline tweet, for example, earlier, one of the most avid Priest players out there. She tweeted that she felt like she could not play Priest in this tournament. So interesting that Tyler has thrown his Priest to the wolves here. Very, very Priest-targeted lineups across the board throughout this Masters Tour. So we'll see if it will be a struggle for him to get this Priest over the line.
Yeah, and I guess it really is just the overall question of just how much can Priest be targeted, or was it going to receive a ban, actually? Because I thought it was going to be brought a lot, but then received a lot of bans, and that's been completely the opposite way. If it was me, I'd be in trouble in this Masters Tour. But kicking off now, the mulligans are done. Tyler, not off to a terrible start with the Mind Flayer Kaj, even though that Apotheosis in hand, just if he manages to stick and maybe gain some of that lifesteal back. But overall, Johnnybambou, you've always got to be careful when there is a coin, Van Cleef, and a backstab in the opening hand of any rogue. So things could look quite dicey for now.
In the shadows.
Tyler does get that Spy Mistress, though, so he does actually have access to something to start fighting back here. But these are the big issues with Rogue. Even though Rogue has taken the nerf with the change to how Galakrond works, there is still these power plays early on. The card draw from the dirty tricks, but now the combo of either Quest Adventurer or to pop off with a big Van Cleef is available. Right now, Tyler only has a way to answer one of those things.
Yeah, and it's early game that's been stabilized by the addition of this questing adventurer as well that we're seeing almost ever present now in Rogue lists, just giving that extra consistency for something to be able to pop off early. If you do get that big, if you're on coin, you get that big shadow step hand early on, get some lackey generation. So you can see all the options here available for Johnnybambou. A lot of the times, against Priest in particular, you can look for opportunities to line up both in the same turn. So you do a questing first, Edwin last kind of turn, because Priest is very good at dealing with one threat at a time, regardless of size. So we'll see if Johnny does choose to greed it out a little here, or whether he's just going to push all in.
It's really tough, isn't it? Because this is one of those strange situations you find yourself a lot of the times while playing Rogue, is sometimes you have almost too many options, and it becomes very easy to misstep and actually either not commit enough or commit too much and then kind of just lose control of the game. Obviously, players of this caliber don't do it that often, but it is one of the more difficult things, at least I find, when I'm kind of managing large Rogue hand sizes.
Yes. Still starting off with the spell lucky here does suggest that this is going to be a pop-off turn for Johnny, but he is pretty deep on this rope. He could go halfway here and choose to, he's going to choose to preserve the Shadow Step for extra removal, potentially, with that Blackjack Stunner, or just pumping up his Questing Adventurer later on. Doesn't want to go all the way in on this Edwin Van Cleef.
And what do you think about that, though? Because to me, the worry might be that this doesn't require hard removal because the Cleef just dies on board. So is this Johnnybambou being a bit too safe here?
It does seem that way. I'm not quite sure what priest hand you're expecting this to be a giant threat against, but there's also the opportunity for Rogue in this matchup. Like, they don't necessarily have to scam the game early just by throwing out huge threats and winning on tempo. They are an extremely adept value deck as well. They can just choose to go very late against priest and try and win the game that way. To me, that's not the way that you do win the matchup, and I do have more success by being aggressive very early on. So personally, I think I might have looked for the curve I was talking about beforehand, where you tried to drop Questing and Edwin on the same turn. But I guess Johnny's worry with that is that he would be doing next to nothing on that turn, and then, if there is just more tempo plays in hand from Tyler, he'd be too far behind on board at that point anyway for even that giant swing turn to catch him up. So it was a tough spot for sure, just generally because of the quality at Tyler's start.
And I quite like this from Tyler. He could have used Apotheosis to make a slightly bigger minion, push some more damage. He wouldn't have healed for tons, but this just is really pushing just the most out of his resources. He didn't need to Apotheosis anything. He has the Spy Mistress stealth anyway, and as we can see, of course, with the outcome now, the flick would have been a bit of a problem if he Apotheosis the Fate Weaver.
Yeah. Now you see Mind Flayer Kaj. It's a card I was just talking about with Lorinda in our virtual green room, as we've christened it, saying this card is just insane. Probably in isolation the best free drop in the game. Edwin Van Cleef is probably the only one I think that really comes into that argument. Obviously, it's a far more situational card. Mind Flayer card is just pretty much any board state. You just take control of it, just with this one card. If it's turn 3, great, just play it on whatever minion that they have and you've won the board. If it's later on in the game, you just play it alongside whatever priest removal spell you have that fits the occasion and you've won the board again. You see exactly that application here coming out from Tyler.
I'll be honest with you, so all I was hearing when you talk about best 3 drops was Huffer. And and then I was just like, any situation. Early game, it goes face. Late game, it goes face.
Yeah.
It's another pretty good 3 drop.
Yeah, I think if you could just put the card Huffer into your deck, then we might have an argument. Sure.
Is that not how you play?
No.
In the meantime, though, Galakrond has come down here, cleaned up this board. Kaj is still a frustration and a potential target for the Apotheosis that Tyler still has one of in hand. But also we see some of the, I guess, tech cards for Tyler with this Plague of... sorry, I'm nearly choking there. Plague of Death. To be it wasn't super common in Galakrond Priest. Is this tech for anything, the post nerf? Is this something that just should be played in the list?
I thought that was just next level role playing for a second. Then, like, you started choking because you were trying to say Plague of Death.
Oh, I should have done it.
Sorry, what was the question?
What's this Plague of Death achieving in this deck now? Because it wasn't super common in earlier Galakrond Priest lists.
It's not, no, but it is a tech card that showed up every now and again, because that is the one thing that this deck really isn't equipped to deal with. They do fight better early game because they just have minions of their own and they have some small AoE effects and so on. Shadow Madness as well can make a mess of a lot of early board states. And when it gets late, they can take singular big threats down very, very effectively, but it's like the big board floods towards the end of the game where, like, one giant Dragon Queen Alexstrasza board, for example, like, if you don't have your fully invoked Galakrond to come down to destroy that, you can struggle against those styles of boards. So I think that's where Plague of Death really comes in as just a safety net to make sure that your opponent can't have one big swing turn against you around turn 9, turn 10.
Okay, well, Johnnybambou is at that point in the game now where he's going to have to consider this late game, isn't he? He's gone beyond the aggro push, I would say, now as we move on towards the last few, turn 8, turn 9. And with Galakrond already equipped by Tyler, Tyler's got value for days, maybe even weeks at this point. But really, Johnny needs to piece something together. And although his hand is okay going for this Quest Adventurer turn here, that's more or less all his hand does, isn't it?
It is. And I would say normally, this matchup post-patch, I don't think you'd have to panic at this point. Like, you can still create that kind of board state I was just talking about, with all the zero-cost card generation that Rogue did have available to them. You can still create that one massive board later in the game that Priest can't deal with in a single turn, especially since Galakron has already come down. But the two things putting a stop to that is, A, thanks to the patch, Johnny's Galakron cards no longer cost 0, which makes it much harder to tempo them all out. And secondly, that Plague of Death that we were just talking about, which makes that much, much more difficult for Johnny to be able to do. So he really does have to kind of incrementally stick board after board and try and run Tyler out of removal here, because that's the one thing you can always do against Priest. It's very, very hard to outvalue their entire deck. You can outvalue their hand. They really don't draw too many cards. And I think that's part of where the early Galakron from Tyler comes into play, is that he never did want to run out of value in his hand. As long as he can continue just being ahead on board and generating and playing minions, those just function as removal for him anyway. So he can stretch out his actual removal much further by doing that.
This is, for me at least, really scary for Johnny, because he didn't even get any of the early damage really done. Like, I struggle in these positions against Priest, but sometimes if you can get just some early damage and then they Galakron on curve, you're like, okay, say they're at 20 health, maybe even less, they gain some armor from the Galakron, you're like, okay, I only need to do 20-ish damage most of the time outside of Apotheosis. But here, 35 health. And Johnny's not really got any threats. It is very, very scary. This Kronk's to be played just to draw the Galakron. I did wonder then if Johnny's... No, okay. Did wonder whether Johnny was going to use that Shadow Step there to put Kronk's back in his hand to combo. That's another way we've seen Rogue in the past bust out some wins, right? With repeat Kronk's post-Galakron.
Yeah, I'm curious about this Dagger Swing going through as well, and what that really achieves, especially with A, Deadly Poison, and B, Galakron in hand right now. I guess if that Galakron's fully invoked, he just wants to get that through and get the Deadly Poison down on the claw instead, which does make some sense. Tyler here using the Renew. He can now create a value trade here with the Apotheosis if he wants to. But I imagine was looking for a straight-up removal option for the 6/6 off that Renew. Ended up just picking up the Silence instead.
It's one of those funny moments, isn't it? Because at certain stages of the game as the Priest, you were very happy with just saying, oh, well, you know, use whatever to kill my opponent's minions. Whereas now, I think Tyler feels so far ahead, he wants to actually be doing the killing, right? And, you know, like, he wants to actually just dominate the board as opposed to just about keep things even.
Yeah. Apologies for the lack of these Discover options, but it seems like Tyler has picked up 2 Silence options off his 2 Discover spell effects.
Also, maybe even more importantly, a card draw option as well.
Yes,
that
Master
Spell will draw him a card, and it's something that Priest does not really do that well, does it?
That's a very good point. So yeah, fully invoked Galakron does come down here.
Oh, I love it now, Sol. I was not the biggest fan of Galakron's 0 mana cards, and now I see they're 1, and he's drawing 1-drops. Okay. That was still pretty good. It was still pretty good. But imagine if they were 0. Oh, yeah, the difference a nerf makes.
It's just the world of difference, right? Because the questing can come down, the Togwaggle can come down, the Blackjack can get played if he wants, he can praise, and then at that point he still can play 2 other cards from the left-hand side of his hand, even more with the Shadow Step, so he'd be making a giant questing adventurer while picking apart this board and generating a treasure into his hand. Now, his options are far more limited.
It does look like giant questing may well be the plan, though, looking at this hand. I see a 1-mana questing and a lot of 1-mana cards. So maybe that will be the plan going forward. And even Shadow Stepping the Togwaggle. And going for those crowns. Is this... I know you were the... one of the, what would you say, biggest fans of maybe the discussion of what you do with Togwaggle against Priest and when you do it. What do you think about this from Johnny, using Togwaggle for a crown and then even Shadow Step after that?
Raven, firstly, our official title is Crown Advocates. Secondly, yeah, I mean, this is conventional wisdom in the Priest matchup, is that, you know, I talked earlier about how your overwhelming amount of card draw compared to Priest having none is one of your big advantages in the matchup as Rogue. So you just kind of have to blow through your whole deck and use all those cards very, very quickly, while Priest still has, you know, 15, 16 cards left remaining in their deck, and therefore your 30 cards beat their 14. However, if you play Wondrous Wand and your opponent has a Murazond, which was my cackling laughter reaction to the minion being generated from Tyler, and then you start to get into trouble. My question here, though, is whether Johnny has enough luxury in the position that he's in to be doing like fancy matchup-specific things here and going for crown minions over and over, because he's just losing on board, right? Like, he just doesn't really have to be worried too much about pre-scamming him with any of their more effective cards. Like, he just has to address the board state first and foremost. And I imagine more zero-cost cards from his deck will end up being more effective than minions on board in that scenario. Either way, he's going to get punished. So, maybe it's much of a muchness, but...
You did use the phrase I was exactly going to use as well, of just losing at this point, because Johnny, it's not even what does he do to end the game, it's what does he do to deal with this board right now, because although it looks a little bit flimsy, there is still some more damage to come from Tyler, there is still Apotheosis, there's still even that convincing Infiltrator's a bit of a pain, actually, if Tyler just throws it down, say next turn. Johnny has to kill it, and then it's going to further reduce his own board.
I like this Betrayal pick from Johnny, and I like not using it this turn. Yes, does seem like he is not going to do so. The Faceless Corruptors here can swing this board state quite nicely, and then your Betrayal, I think you've hedged nicely against the Murazond coming out from the opponent. If the Murazond comes down, plays a random crown, Betrayal can potentially make a big mess of that.
Yeah, and also this was just about as good as it was going to get for board presence, wasn't it?
Yep.
I think anything else, like you, as you mentioned, like going big on one single minion, it isn't really going to cut it with this questing. So, the one interesting play I think Johnny might be looking at going forward, or one that can be useful, is you go off with the questing, and with the help of this Goblin Lackey, you can actually rush it into something, to have like a big kill target.
That's fair.
That could be quite useful going forward.
Now for Tyler, though, has multiple options to pick this board apart. It's just an option of which one he wants to potentially expend here, if any of them. Obviously, using Murazond to steal the treasure from your opponent is huge, but you might just not have that luxury. It might end up being a Soul Mirror turn here instead.
Yeah, I mean, not now, because he just played Renew. He could have actually just traded a 1-1. Okay, well, that's better.
Huge.
Yep. He could have just traded a Lackey in and then Soul Mirrored and then just Apotheosis one of his own minions and start pushing, which would have been very, very good. But if you told me he's going to do this, then I'm not going to argue too much either.
I think the sort of free roll on the Renew was kind of worth it for the sake of not being able to Apotheosis afterwards. Like, if you end up whiffing and you have to Soul Mirror Hero Power, fine. But then when you factor in all the potential high rolls that do come off the Renew, I think it probably was worth opening the box first and seeing what was inside. And he finds himself a very nice tempo play with the Shadow Word Ruin, which I guess more so than tempo just preserves a premium removal tool in his hand again with the Soul Mirror.
And unfortunately here for Johnny, he's in the same position once again where he's just facing down an awkward board that he can do something against, but is it going to be good enough? Because Tyler has still got options. He still has that Murazond. He still has the emergency or double emergency switches of Soul Mirror and the Plague of Death we spoke about a little bit earlier.
Yeah, not to mention all these additional silence effects that he's picked up along the way to be able to deal with situations exactly like this without really having to make a big deal out of any of his mass removal. If there's just one big threat on board, be it a questing adventure or whatever else, he can quite easily deal with that scenario.
Right. The only problem I could see Tyler having for the short term, and even that has helped a lot with the draw of the Shield of Galakrond, is that he had answers in his hand, but nothing to actually start building his board up once again, right? He had all the options to push back anything that Johnny was going to threaten him with, but nothing else to build that board up. But now, with the Shield of Galakrond and even just a few more options, always off that hero power that's available, he's looking a little bit better once again.
Yeah, and I like the sequencing here from Tyler as well, playing the minion first to look for ambush. If you did see the ambush, you can then think about using your Master Spell instead of the Spot Silence to deal with the ambush token as well, or potentially just Apotheosis and trade over it. It looks like he's going to do that anyway, probably just for mana expenditure purposes, more so than anything else.
Yeah, you did get to prop the secret as well. So the knowledge is there once again.
We had it as soon as he played the minion. There's only the 2 secrets in
Oh,
the
sorry,
deck,
yeah,
so
of course he played
knew what it
Gallic
was.
on this turn. Yeah.
Yep.
My hopes and dreams of people playing Bamboozle again one day.
I know, you're the guy that loves Bamboozle so much you would continue to play it in your Questing Adventurer deck just to be stubborn.
Yeah, it's almost like a third Quest Adventure if you don't really think about it, right?
Yeah, you just one drop Bamboozle on 3, and then you just hope the game breaks and you end up with a Questing Adventurer somehow.
Easy. I am still very interested to see what Johnny does with this Togwaggle he chose to Shadow Step, because Shadow Step, it is almost just a game-winning card in Rogue, I feel like, and he saw it, didn't use it on the Krunks, hasn't used it on anything else so far, did go for that Togwaggle, and now he's going to go for that other crown, and very interesting.
Yeah, I think you started to make the argument yourself, though, right? Because he used the Kronks, he didn't Shadow Step it. The Flick is already gone. You know, most of the high priority targets were already gone. So once Togwaggle hit the board, that's kind of the mentality, right? Is like, if I don't step this, when am I getting value out of this Shadow Step? It would be like a blackjack stunner tempo swing play or something like that, which probably isn't quite as impressive as additional treasures. Yeah,
100% agree. And here, we're going to see that Plague of Death we spoke about a while ago probably pay off here for Tyler.
Is there a Soul Mirror line instead?
Or to Soul Mirror and kill off the Ashes.
Right. Because you also still have Silence available to you anyway, right? So you don't necessarily have to be able to get the full clear. You have the 0 mana Silence that can tidy things up as well. You have Penance after that as well.
Yeah, so Soul Mirror, Penance, Silence would deal with the 2 Ashes.
You also have to... There's also board space concerns because you need 5 spot. Yeah, so if he trades down this way, he can summon it. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, looks good to me. The fact he can deal with both Ashes is just perfect, right? Does mean that now, unfortunately for Johnny, he's got to worry about these Ashes bringing back double Halar. And Tyler, on the other hand, nothing to worry about on his end. And this Hanar has also been on the board for a very long time, which is, I don't know why, but it is amusing.
It's amusing because this is APAC Raven talking. That's why it's amusing.
I think most importantly, it's because there's Hanar and Alar now on the board.
Yeah.
So hopefully one of them goes away soon so we don't get mixed up.
On a more serious note, this all comes back to that decision from Tyler to go fishing with that Renew first on the turn where you were talking about the Soul Mirror Apotheosis play, for example, where he preserved Soul Mirror for not just a removal tool, which, you know, if Soul Mirror is used to clear a board, great, good card. If Soul Mirror is used to clear a board and gain benefit for yourself at the same time, that's when the card gets absolutely bananas. And through Tyler's sequencing earlier, he's now ended up in a position where he's been able to achieve the optimal value off of Soul Mirror.
And Johnny here going off of these secrets, the problem is this. I feel at least that the secrets never really get you back in a game. They help you either secure an early game with the help of just the fact that Hanar's just a pretty chunky minion anyway, or they help just keep the game in your favor, but they never really pull you back, do they? So I'm worried that Johnny's just, although, you know, going off with a full turn of secrets, if these secrets just aren't good enough to do anything anyway, because Tyler can just keep doing the same. Funnily enough, he could just play Morozond, I was going to say, and just completely mimic all the secrets he has.
Yeah, this play is so good, and you generally do this kind of thing in the Rogue matchup, because first and foremost, you play a ton of cards with your Morozond, which is great, but secondly, you then get full information about how to pick apart the board on the other side, which of course is the most frustrating part of playing against a Hanar turn like this. So now Tyler is just mousing over all of his secrets, working out exactly what the optimal line is to pick this board apart on the other side. Turns out it's just hit the minions, because there's nothing preventing you from doing that.
Yeah, and we've also hit that stage in this matchup where the advantage of the Rogue's card draw suddenly becomes the disadvantage, right? Because we can see now Johnny edging towards Fatigue with only 2 cards left, and because the Priest isn't a big, heavy card draw deck, Tyler's still got all the time in the world before he hits fatigue, and he's still got a good-sized hand. So you can see, especially once you get to this point, who's really been ahead for most of the game, because normally the game's either over by now or the priest has like no cards in hand, right? On the hero power in every turn to try and stick something.
Yep. It's a byproduct of the early Galacron from Tyler as well, where he just jammed it on curve. Looking at the state of his hand at the time, he had so much removal going on in there anyway. He didn't really feel like he needed it. This isn't really the deck that pumps up the Galacron to the max all the time. Like, sometimes you are just going to jam it on curve to generate some value. That's exactly what he did. And now you're saying not only does Tyler have a good hand size, the quality of his hand is also fantastic. Right. He has an additional generated Murazond, and he still has the emergency kill switch with the Plague of Death as well. And Johnny, after thinking long and hard about how he was going to pick that board state apart, in the end said, nope, I can't. My only line here is bottom right, and I was inclined to agree from that position. Did not see a way his deck was going to find any solution to the problems that were being presented.
Yeah, that was really tough, wasn't it? And let's remember, that was 2 waves of crowns. And to be fair to Johnny, he didn't get the best legendary summons, right? He got, Elysiana, and then those Alars. The Alars could have been a problem, but that was... What?
Sorry, I'm being attacked by a moth as we speak. It's fine.
No, they were the legendaries he got.
No, you're doing
I was right.
Great, Raven. Believe in yourself, okay? You're crushing it. Don't worry.
But honestly, I will go back to it just very quickly, but that Soul Mirror turn, along with the Silence, the Penance, really was just the final nail in the coffin there for Johnny in that game. But we are moving on to game number 3. Just a little bit of an update. Tyler did win his game number 1 with his Druid. He obviously just took a win with the Priest that we did see. And this is going to be our game number 3 on that Highlander Hunter. And I did have to check Tyler's list with his Hunter, because as we've seen already, it's not only Highlander people are using Hunter with in this tournament so far.
No, we saw the Dragon Hunter, the 2-Obs deck in the previous series, the main series for round 1, featuring Fury Hunter. But Tyler is back on the grind with one of the most common decks that we saw throughout GM Season 1, for example, in the Highlander Hunter. And it is, in fact, the most common class and the most common deck in the tournament, which goes to speak about what I was saying at the start of this series, which is that a lot of people were bringing Highlander Hunter because they're expecting Priest, for example. They're potentially expecting Quest Warlocks on the other side as well. So this is a pretty ever-present deck. It also ends up being so because it's one of the best decks in the game that hasn't really been touched in the last wave of nerfs. So just by proxy, it's got stronger as the other decks around it have got weaker. So I think this is a pretty predictable one to see that we'd be seeing a lot of Hunter in this tournament.
Right, and although Dragon Queen Alexstrasza has taken a pretty significant nerf, and that is a card that is in this Highlander Hunter, I feel like Hunter was the least affected by that nerf, because of what they really use Alexstrasza for, generally. It's just more value. And although they can't, just have a huge power spike turn on 9, it just gives them more powerful things to do going forward. But already, Tyler just having the sharpshooter into the spear is looking pretty good for this early game against Johnny's Rogue. Decided to lock that Rogue in once again.
Yeah, and a pretty miserable looking turn 3 here from Johnny as well. I was curious about his turn 2, where he just straight up went and played the Secret instead of just playing Hanar out as the 1-4 on the board. The 1-4 wasn't immediately contested by just the Dwarven and the Hero Power. So it would have been difficult to remove from Tyler's side, and he potentially could have then double played Secrets on the follow-up. As it happens, he did draw Seal Fate, so that at least allows him to cycle that 3-cost card into a 1-cost Lackey. He does now have potential Miscreant options on 4, but didn't really get the ideal Lackey for the situation either.
Right. This is one of those weird turns as well. Normally this hand is fantastic for Hunter, right? You have Scale Rider to help secure the board early. The Primordial Explorer is always great to have, because not only is it just a good on curve and threat minion because of the poisonous, it gives you a dragon in hand once again if you get that weapon. So it's looking great so far, but there was just a pause, I think, from Tyler because of the card he drew, which was the Imprisoned Felmore. Normally you want that down early as possible,
yes,
but it would revolve him to not only be off curve this turn, but potentially for the next couple of turns if he didn't want to drop just a base Dragonbane on board as well. So I think overall the decision was correct there to just go with that Explorer and just say, you know what, I can be flexible in the next couple of turns with this Felmore.
Yeah, I do like it. It gets very complex because of the Primordial Explorer that you're playing. But it did look like your hand curved out by playing a 4-drop on 4 and then potentially the Felmore plus the Scale Rider on 5 to then bridge your way to the Dinotamer Brand. And by picking up Varanus, Tyler looks like that's the curve he's going to play. So then Varanus goes on 6 and Dinotamer goes on 7. But because you were playing Primordial Explorer that turn, there's all sorts of options you could have ended up with that would have changed that curve, right? But I do agree with you, all things considered. I think just sticking to the curve and being as mana efficient as possible is the number one thing you want to be looking out for with Highlander Hunter.
I also think an extra couple of bonus points there was from just seeing the Seal of Fate as well, because there was
what's the name of the card?
The Seal Fate is. Yes. If I have to say it again. So. I think once you've seen one, that's one of the huge weaknesses of playing Primordial early against Rogue, and it's just a fantastic target for Seal Fate. Seeing one, it might just have made it even a little bit more enticing for Tyler.
Whoa. This curve is just absolutely juicy.
It is. This Shield of Galakron may not exist for that long, Soto.
Rotnest Drake is such a beating. When you're in positions like this and you just, okay, I need to stabilize. I just need a minion on the board that can just fight stats for stats with some of this stuff that's in play and be able to deal with the situation. It's always those spots where they just have the Rotnest Drake and the Activating Dragon and just blow you out immediately. As it stands, there is a Dragonbane on board, so if you can't deal with that, you're probably in trouble regardless. But it's a position where potentially Rotnest can just be a huge beating.
So many options.
I've got a wild suggestion. And this is definitely an issue because I see Rotnest in hand. But I did wonder whether you ever try and think about preemptively like Seal Fate on the Dragonbane to then go Lackey into Faceless Corruptor the turn after.
Yeah.
Is that just because I'm looking at Rotnest? Probably.
I mean, I don't think it's just because of that. Like, you know, your mind is telling you that this Dragonbane is an enormous problem and that it needs to be freaking dealt with. And if you can't deal with it, how are you possibly ever winning this game? But really, I think Johnny's thinking that exact thought process that I laid out earlier. It's like, I just need a minion. I need something to be able to hit into this Dragonbane, do a bit of damage, and then I can restabilize. And guess what? Rotnest Drake in the back pocket, always there to punish you in that scenario.
And there just isn't much to do, is there, from Johnny? Like, this has been as strong an opening as possible, really, for Tyler. I think he was probably just missing the Felmore on curve, I guess, and he would have kept hold of the coin. But other than that, like, it's backbreaking. And as you mentioned, the Rotnest, just putting off that Shield of Galakron means that Johnny's options are limited. Does have that Lackey into the Faceless Corruptor, of course, but where do you even aim them, right? If you go into the Dragonbane twice, great, the Dragonbane's dead, but you've just been hit for 6 because the Rotnest lives, so it's just a problem whichever way you look at it, yeah.
And it's not like there's really any inherent value in having 2 4-1s left on the board after the value trades happen, because A, there's a Desert Spear, B, there's just 2 1-attack minions on the board anyway that can take care of that scenario, right? It's just lose-lose scenario.
Oh, and this is just the last slap in the face, isn't it, for this game? After all that, Varanus is there, the clear comes up, because this is what Johnny wanted to avoid with those trades. He left the 2 powerful minions on board so he could get as much value from the Faceless Corruptors. Nope, as the Varanus comes down, cleans this up, and I think we might be striding towards a 3-0 victory here for Tyler.
It's looking very much that way, yeah. It's I think it's very fair to call this the perfect curve from Hunter. You talked about how the 2-drop was missed, but I think honestly, coin 3 into 3 is a curve that is mulligan for with this deck when you're going second a lot of the time. So I think you're perfectly happy to do that in the scenario. So sure, we can have an argument about whether Felmore on 2 would have been better than what Tyler did, but outside of that, no dispute. Best card possible, every turn, every mana slot, all the way up. And if Highlander Hunter does that, it's what the deck's built to do. So you're not going to beat it when it does do that.
Johnny's going to make an attempt. Let's face a Slacky outcome, not significant, but could have
Wah,
been.
wah.
Maybe one of the taunts, not going to be good enough. Tyler takes a round 1 victory, 3-0. And like we were talking, it's frustrating to lose round 1. It must feel great to just 3-0 it, right? Just get in there, 3-0, move along, take a bit of a break, and get ready for the next round.
Yeah, and big win as well for the Priest lineup from Tyler, being able to get through 3-0, as I did raise some question marks of how the Priest players are going to perform, with so many of even the biggest Priest advocates saying, nope, this is too toxic a metagame for me to be bringing Priest into, with what I'm predicting from the rest of the field here. So Priest lineup, first viewing of it that we've had on stream, it's passed the test with absolutely flying colours, as Tyler picks up a very, very quick 3-0.
Yeah, and we've got plenty more coverage of round 1 matches for you guys coming right up. We are going to go to a quick break while we get the next match ready. And don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.